let me know if my screen is visible so that we can begin with today's session.
Is it visible? You can proceed.
Yeah, thank you. So class, the topic for today's web development session is JavaScript, and my name is Rimjim, and I work here as a cloud engineer. So let's move ahead with the agenda part. So in today's session, like I'll be covering a basic difference of what HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is all about, and then we'll move ahead with introduction, output, and then like I'll compare some other programming languages with JavaScript, and then we can move ahead with variable keywords and functions. Okay, so mostly people get confused about with what HTML and what is CSS and what is JavaScript, and they think like it's one programming language. So like we have JavaScript as one functionality of HTML. Okay, so like JavaScript is one of the three languages all web developer should learn, and HTML is like the content or the structure of my web page. Okay, so for example, if I'm running a web application, okay, so in my web page, the structure, for example, if I'm writing HTML doc type and then I'm writing the body section, so like all this particular structure is what my HTML describes up to. Okay, and then we have CSS. So with CSS, like we just design our elements, and then we have JavaScript, which is mainly to program the structure or to program the functionality of my web page. So for example, if we open a job application site, or if you're opening any e-commerce website, so if we see the structure, so the structure is mainly with it is HTML. Okay, and then if we have some kind of layout, some images, some um, designing to the buttons, so that is what is CSS. Okay, so like that functionality is covered by CSS, and then if we're clicking on some button, and then after clicking on the button, if we are reaching to some other page, so the click of a button is the functionality which is covered by JavaScript. Okay, so for example, if I take another example, so if we have uh, so for example, if we have a calculator, so like the calculator, to make my calculator structure, I have to use HTML. So for example, I'm using in the body section of my program, I'm creating three buttons, or if I'm in the body section of my program, I'm creating three or four elements, I'm writing a function. So like this is what is the structure is covered by HTML. Okay, and then if I am adding some buttons here on my calculator, and then if I am providing some designing or some layout to my calculator, then I'll be using CSS to achieve this particular agenda of mine. And then if I want to add some functionality to my button, so for that I have to use JavaScript. And in today's session, I'll teach you how do we add functionality to our program, or to a basic HTML program, how do we add some basic functionality um, to be more understandable. Okay, so like in my for my buttons, I'll just put some functionality behind it, for example, addition, subtraction, or multiplication functionality for my calculator program. Okay, so like a JavaScript, as I told you, JavaScript is a it adds functionality to my program, and it's a programming statement. So for example, if you're writing JavaScript in your resume, so you should never mention it under the section where you're mentioning C++, Java. So whenever you're writing JavaScript, HTML, CSS, always make sure that you're writing another section which is mainly web development languages or front end languages, or um, web languages, and then there you should write JavaScript always. So JavaScript is a list of programming statement, and it adds functionality to my program, and then it's a list of programming languages of the web. And talking about one of the most important functionality of JavaScript, which is case sensitiveness. Okay, so whenever I'm writing my JavaScript program, I have to make sure that I'm using consistent capitalization of letters. So if I'm reusing get element by id statement, or if I'm performing some string methodology, which I'll show you in the lab section of later today. So whenever you're writing such programs for JavaScript, we always have to make sure that we're using consistent capitalization of letters. So like G has to be capital, E has to be capital. So we have to remember such things whenever we are writing any JavaScript program. Talking about other programming languages, for example, if you're writing C++, or Java program, so if you're using stdio.h or conio.h, if you're importing any kind of library, so there capitalization of letters. doesn't bother the console. But here in JavaScript, even if you're importing something or even if you're writing some statements, even a simple output statement, we have to follow capitalization of letters. So JavaScript is highly case sensitive, and whenever we are using or whenever we are even declaring a keyword or if you're declaring any variables or functions, we always have to make sure that we are following a case sensitiveness or consistent capitalization of letters while writing my program. So let's just move ahead. So talking about variables, so variables are used to store values. Like other programming languages, we have variables like var, float, and all those things. So in JavaScript, whenever I'm declaring a variable, we have to use this two particular these three keywords var, let, and cons to declare my variables. And then to assign a value to my variable, I have to use a equal sign. And then we can also perform mathematical operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication to compute values. So like as I told you, JavaScript is all about adding functionality to my program, like adding functions, adding variables, adding some operations to your program. So like to add two particular operators, we can use variables. We can define two variables and then we can add those two variables and then store the value in the third variable. So like variables are mainly, why do we use variables is to store a kind of value, to store any kind of value, for example a decimal value, a float value, or a consistent value. So to declare any kind of variable, I have to use var, let, and const to declare variables. Okay, so let's move ahead. Talking about output, so like in today's session class, what I'll be doing is like I'll teach you that much so that you'll be able to write a simple program for JavaScript. Okay, so like since very beginning, like I covered variables, so how do we declare a variable? And like in any programming language, so for example if you are learning C or if you're learning C++, so there are four or five things which we should always begin with. So for example, if you know how to declare a variable, if you know how to write an output statement or how to write an input statement and how to close a statement, or what is the library which we are using whenever we are writing a program. So these are the four things which we always have to make sure while writing any program. Okay, so like in JavaScript, these are the four output statements which we use to display output to our console. So like we have inner HTML. So today, like while running the labs, I'll show you how do we use all the four statements while running our program. So writing into an HTML element, we can use inner HTML. Again, while writing into the HTML output, we can use document.write. If we want our output in an alert, as an alert message, so we can use window.alert. Or if you want to write into the browser console, we can use console.log. So these are the four output statements which we have in JavaScript while writing our programs. Okay, so like as compared to other programming languages, in JavaScript also we have some keywords to be followed. So for example, as I told you, we'll be using var, let, and const to declare our variables. To declare our variable, I'll be using var, and to declare a block of variables, I'll be using let, and then I'll be using const to declare a block constant. If I'm writing any kind of conditional statement, if I want to compare two numbers or if I want to compare anything, I'll be using if. To execute a loop of statements, I'll be using switch, make a block of statements, or like it's very similar class, like how we were writing in C++, we were passing some case statements and then we are using break statements. Similar to that in JavaScript also, we have switch statement for block of statements to be executed in different cases. And then we have for, which marks a block of statements to be executed in a loop. So like how we were declaring for I is equal to 0, I is less than n, and then I plus plus. So to declare a loop of statements, we are using for in JavaScript also. And then if I want to declare a function or if I want to declare a code of block which has some functionality, and then later in any section of my program I can call that particular function. So for that I'll be using function keyword. Then we have return, and then we have try, catch, and all these error handling methods in JavaScript also. And then we have functions. So like what is function is, so it's a statement which has some functionality to it. Okay, it is a group of statements which can be called from anywhere in my program. Okay, so JavaScript statements can be grouped together in code blocks inside my curly brackets. Okay, and the purpose of code blocks is to define statements to be executed together. So whenever I'm declaring a JavaScript program, I always like whenever I'm creating a function, I have to always make sure that I'm using this keyword function. It's not like C++, like we are using this, like to declare a function in C++, you only use this part, okay? But to declare a function here in JavaScript, we also have to use this keyword. So whenever we are declaring a function, we have to make sure that we're preceding it with a function keyword, and then the name of my function, like any name I can put, followed by round brackets, and then the functionality which I'm writing in my um, function, I will write using a curly braces, okay? So like whenever we are writing a function, we always have to make sure that it is preceded by the keyword function, and then the name of the function followed by round braces, okay? And then whatever thing which we are writing in a loop, we would be using curly braces. Like whatever the code of statements which we are writing, we always have to make sure that we are writing inside a curly braces, okay? And this is the structure which I'll be following today. So this is my structure for writing a JavaScript program. So whenever I'm writing a JavaScript program, I have to make sure that I'm using a tag which is script tag. So like inside my script tag, I'll be writing my entire code. So inside my script, I'll be writing all the codes which I'm using here. Okay, so like HTML body, we all know what is HTML. So inside the body section, we will be declaring script tag, and then inside my script tag, I'll be mentioning all the statements or all the codes which I want to execute. So that's it for what do we say, that's it for the presentation, and let's just move ahead with today's lab sessions. So in lab session, what I'll do is like I'll be covering somewhere around 10 programs, coming from basics till like string level. So like first I'll cover some 2 to 3 statements, like how do we use print statements in JavaScript, and then I'll cover some a program to declare variables, like how do we declare a variable, how do we declare a function, and then I'll be using some inbuilt functions in JavaScript. So for example, I'll be using inbuilt string operations, inbuilt date functions, and then uh, all those things. Okay, so let's just begin with a basic program for JavaScript. Class, is it clear till now, or anyone is having any doubts? Guys, are we awake? Shrishti, Nivas, Rohan. Guys, hello, am I audible? Are we awake? Yeah, okay. Thank you. So let me just move ahead with the program. Any doubts? Any doubts anybody is having in the presentation? I hope it's clear. If anybody is not responding, so I'll assume this as clear and then I'll move ahead. Okay. So like as I told you, in HTML, whenever we are writing any program, we'll be using doc type as HTML. So this statement, what it describes as, like it will assume that my entire page is a HTML page, and then while saving my program, I'll be saving with .html extension. Okay, and then we'll be using HTML tag. So we are having an opening HTML tag and a closing HTML tag, and then inside my body section, I'll be, as I told you, I'll be declaring a script tag, because this is a JavaScript program. Okay, so the first output statement is document.write. Okay, so document.write, and then inside my document.write, I'll be writing any kind of statement. So for example, let's just write hello world, and then let's just come out of it, and then I'll end my script tag. Okay, slash script, and then that's it. And then we have ended the body section, and then we have ended the HTML section, and then let me just save my program. And then whenever we save JavaScript program, like we'll be using this normal .html extension to run our programs. Okay, so save. Let's go to the folder example1, and then let's just run it. So we have our output. So this is the first output statement which I told you. So hello world. So we have document.write as our uh, first output statement, and then we have other output statements also. So for that, let me just for example, for clear understanding, let me just add some tags also here. So we have h1 tag for headers. So we have h1, h2, h3, h1 being the highest, and then h6 being the lowest. Okay, slash h1. And then what we'll do is, like, instead of document.write, let's just use some another statement, which is window.alert. Okay, and then herein I'll be let's just perform some operation here. For example, let's just perform a calculation. So 2 plus 2, and then let's just end our statement with this, and then save, and then rerun our program. So if you can see, like, no, I don't think so. If you can see, like, here the output statement which I have used was alert message. So whenever we are using alert message as our output statement, so we'll be getting the pop-up as our output. Okay, so here in my operation which I performed was 2 plus 2 4, so I'm getting my output as 4 here, and the statement was windows.alert. And then the third output statement which we can use here is, let's just use document.get element by id inside this, and then we'll perform some operation. Okay, so document dot, so like this was the one which I was telling in the very beginning, that we have to follow case sensitivity here. Okay, so herein I have to use b as capital, e as capital, and then by would be small, and then again I would be capital and d would be small. Okay, and then herein I'll be printing my, like, I'll be first I'll call my id after this, and then dot inner html. Okay, and then here also I'll be using html as caps lock is equal to, so for example, if I want to perform my operation like this, 2 plus 2, and then let me just end my operation. So herein, since we're declaring we're using this statement document or get element where id as an output statement, so I have to use here this what do we say, like, I have to declare an id also. Okay, so I'll declare my id here using a paragraph tag. Okay, so p id is equal to let's say, like, let me just name a common thing which is demo, and then outside my demo, like, I'll end my paragraph tag first, and then I'll call my id here. Okay, which is demo. Let's just save it. And then what it would do is, so what is this id class is, so id is, like, how do we have Aadhaar numbers, and then we have PAN numbers, which is unique identification number. So whenever I'm printing my, whenever I'm using a document or element by id statement, print statement, so I have to always declare an id which is a unique number. So if I want to use one more output statement, so for example, if I want to display one more output statement, so I have to declare one more id here, and then again so for example, I'll declare here one more id which is demo 1, and then if I'm using another print statement, document dot get element by id, so I'll be calling demo 1 instead of demo, and then I'll print my statement. So let me just save it and then run my program. So here, and if you can see, like, I'm getting my output as 4. So, like, we covered three statements. One was document or get element by id print statement. The second was a document dot write, and then the third was window dot alert. So these are the three output statements which we have in JavaScript. And then also we can use on click buttons and all those things to write my program. Okay, is this clear, class, until now? So let me just cover another program which is date function. So, like, since we already have this particular thing, so what I'll be doing here is, like, inside my script tag will also, like, on the click of a button, I'll be displaying today's date and today's time. Okay, so what I'll do is button type as button. So, like, what is my agenda here is, on the click of my button, I'll be displaying today's date. Okay, so, like, button type is button, and then on click of my button, I'll be displaying this particular thing. Okay, on click, on click is equal to, herein I'll be writing this particular thing in inside what do we say, inside my double quotes. So let me just remove this from here. and then control V, document or get element by ID, and then the demo which I have already called. And then herein again I have to use this dot inner HTML statement since I want to print today's date. Okay, so again HTML would be in caps lock, and then is equal to date function, and then here D would be capital covered by two braces. Okay, and then after this particular thing, whatever I'll be writing, it would be the name of my button. So for example, here I'm writing click me, and then I'll close my button here. Okay, slash button. I hope it is clear for everyone in class till until now. So the agenda in this program here is, what I'm doing is, on the click of my button, what I'm doing is I am displaying today's date and time using an inbuilt function in JavaScript. So date is an inbuilt function here, and I'm using that particular function. So herein what I have done is button type is equal to button, and on the click of my button I'm displaying this particular ID which is demo, and then dot inner HTML is equal to today's date, and then once I click and then this is the name of my button which is click me. Okay, so I'll save it. I guess the button isn't displaying. Let me just do this thing. Instead of calling this particular function here, this particular ID here, what I'll do is I'll call it after this, after writing this statement. So button type would be button here. On click of the button, let me just check the program first. On click of the button, what I'm doing is I'm writing this document or element by html as date. Okay, and then after this I'm closing the button. Is there anything else which I missed? No. So let me just save it, control S, and then rerun my program. The button is not coming. Why? This is an event type which I've given to my button on click. This is the issue class. Like if I have even missed a single case sensitiveness here, I would not be able to run my program. This is what is the issue with JavaScript. So let me just check document.get element by ID. I have written here demo, and then I have called demo below. What I can do is, even demo I can just put it in single quotes. This also works. So demo is there, .html. I have written date, and then let's just again save and see if our okay. So let me just try to remove this script also and see. Yeah. So if we see, like on the click of my button, I'll be able to see today's date and time. Okay. So date is an inbuilt function in JavaScript, and then I'm using this particular function to display today's time. So we have July 5, and then the time is 16:56, and then we'll get it. So the next program for today would be string functions. So I'll be covering some 5 to 6 string functions today. So let me just change the header also. So like in string functions, what I'll be doing is, like I'll be covering string functions. So for example, to calculate the length of a particular string, or to find out the particular string character at a particular position, and all those things. Okay, so inside the body section of my program, what I'll do is I'll write string first script here, and then I'll come out of script, and then herein, as I told you, we would be declaring variables. So my first variable here would be so let's say I have taken here what do we say, good morning, good evening. Okay, and then whenever I'm using or declaring a string, I have to make sure that I'm ending it with semicolons. And then the second string which I'll declare is len. Okay, so length is equal to, and then inside my length what I want to do is I want to find out the character at a particular position in my string one. Okay, so what I'll be doing is str dot character, and then here also have to follow the case sensitiveness which is a. So I want to find out a character at a particular position which is 3. Okay, and then let me just end this statement, and after ending the statement I have to print my particular output. So I'm using document.write statement, document.write, and then what I want to write here is I want to print this particular, the output of this particular variable. So I want to print here len. Okay, so I have used len, and then I'll use this semicolon slash script, and then I have entered the body section, and then I have entered the html section of my program. So control s. So like what I have found out is like the character at third position is uh what is the output, the character at third position is d. Okay, so like we have here 1 2 3 4. So can anybody tell me why my output was why it came as d? Because if you can see here 1 2 3 4, fourth number is d, so it like my output should be 0, like 0 is at the third position. So like how indexing happens here, can anyone tell me? Okay, so indexing in JavaScript or any other programming language, so we have arrays, we have indexing in JavaScript. So indexing always begins with 0 here. Okay, so we have 0 1 2 3. So on third place we had d, so our output was d here. Okay, so the character, like the function which I have used here is character at. Okay, so like to find out a particular position, to find out the value at a particular position. So you're in I the value at 3 was d here. So indexing starts from 0 1 2 3. So I got my output as d. I hope that is clear because I'm not getting any response from anyone. So the next function which I'll be using here is, for example, if I want to convert this particular um, and the above string which is good evening to uppercase. Okay, so we have str dot to uppercase. Okay, so I'll be using to u double per, and then again c would be capital to uppercase, and then I'll be printing my statement. Okay, so like my lowercase was converted into uppercase. Okay, so the string function which I used was str dot uppercase. Okay, so we similar to this we have lowercase also, so I can convert my to lowercase, and then L has to be capital here again because we have to follow serious case sensitivity. So let me just write good only, and then control S. So if you can see, like we had our output in this like it converted our uppercase into lowercase. So these are the functions which we have in JavaScript, and then let me just use one more thing which is so for example, if I want to replace a particular value, so the function which I have to use is str dot replace. So what I'll be doing is str dot replace, and then what the value which I want to replace is let's say good with, let me just replace good with another value. So I'll be passing two parameters here. My first parameter would be the value which I want to, with the value which I want to replace, and the second parameter would be the new value. So the second value which I want to replace here is, let's say I want to write hi. Okay, hi morning instead of good morning. So I want to replace this, and then again it would be similar. It would be similar like I want to print my statement this len value. So I'll just save it, and then I'll run my program. So instead of good morning, I have hi morning now. Okay, and then the next string. I hope everything is like things are getting clearer for everyone because I'm not getting any response. So the next value is I'll be using len value. So length, to calculate the length of a particular string. So let me just keep a smaller value. So what I'll be using here is str.length, length, length, and then I'll be printing the length of this particular string which is there. Okay, control S, and then the length is 4. Okay, so this was one, and then I guess I'm done with all the string functions, and then all the output statements I've covered. And then let me just show you a function example also. It is an easy one. So how do we write a function? So like as I told you, this is the output statement which I taught you how to write an output statement in C, in JavaScript. So here in what I have done is I have declared a function which is ABC. Okay, so as I told you, like to declare any kind of function, it has to be preceded by a function keyword. So I've used a function keyword followed by the name of my function and then the round brackets. Okay, and then inside my function I have to use this curly braces to write the code of statements. Okay, so the statements which I have used is these are the printing statements, and what I'm printing here is good morning and good. Okay, so these are the printing statements which I've told you, and like to print two statements I have to declare two IDs here. So I have declared two IDs, and then how I'm calling my function is on the click of my button, my function would be executed here. So button type is button, and on click of my button, what I'm calling is I'm calling this function ABC. Okay, and then the name of my button is click. So this is a function example which is very simple. So let me just run it. So like on the click of my button, my function would be executed. Like this was the agenda of the program. So on the click of my button, my function was executed with this two particular output statement which I have used, good morning and good. Okay. So I guess I have covered all the programs for today. Any doubts anybody is having? Okay, class. That's it for today's session. Thank you so much and have a nice evening. Bye.